I never thought I'd one day feel guilt just by looking at an empty doghouse. We got Bonnie when she was just a puppy, soft, playful with those big, trusting eyes. My husband and I had always wanted a dog. A big one. Loyal. Protective. Family. Bonnie was all that and more. She was a German shepherd. Sharp as a whip, eager to learn and full of love. We trained her ourselves, played with her in the park, brought her along on road trips. She was our pride. Our shadow. Our comfort. At night, she'd curl up by our bed. In the morning, she'd greet us like she hadn't seen us in years. She wasn't just a pet. She was home. Back then, if someone had told me I'd one day chain her outside, I would have said they were crazy. But life has a way of twisting even the strongest bonds, especially when fear creeps in. I found out I was pregnant on a cold November morning. I still remember the way Bonnie tilted her head at me when I sat on the bathroom floor, holding the test in my trembling hands. It should have been a moment of joy, and it was at first. My husband lifted me off the floor and spun me around. Bonnie barked and jumped, trying to join the celebration, not understanding what was changing. But it didn't take long before the fear started creeping in. Every article I read warned about bacteria, scratches, fur, even jealousy. I joined mom forums where women shared horror stories. Dogs snapping at babies, pets being unpredictable after childbirth. The thought gnawed at me. Bonnie was perfect. But what if motherhood meant I had to make hard decisions? I started to pull away. Subtly at first. I didn't let her sleep near our bed anymore. I kept her off the couch. When I spoke to my husband, I lowered my voice and said things like, "She's a good dog, but we should be cautious." I think she felt it. Dogs know when something shifts. She began waiting by the door longer, following me with quieter steps, her eyes searching mine for answers. I didn't give her any. And then the day came when I said the words that changed everything. "I think it's time we move her outside." The day we moved Bonnie outside was sunny, painfully sunny, the kind of weather that usually makes you feel grateful to be alive. But that morning, everything felt wrong. My husband built her a wooden doghouse in the backyard. He made it sturdy, added blankets, even installed a little roof over her food bowls. He said she'll be fine. She's a dog. She'll adapt. And she did, sort of. The first night was the hardest. She barked at the door for hours, scratching, whining. I sat in the kitchen, holding a cup of tea, tears rolling down my cheeks. But I didn't go to her. I told myself this was for the baby. I had to protect him. I had to be smart, responsible. Bonnie stopped barking after 3 days. She understood. And that broke me more than the noise. She still wagged her tail when we came outside. Still licked our hands. Still waited for a kind word. But she was different now, quieter. Her eyes didn't sparkle the way they used to. Something in her had dimmed. I told myself we'd bring her back in one day. After the baby grew. After we felt safe. But weeks turned into months. And soon enough, she became a fixture in the yard. Like a piece of furniture we loved but no longer used. When Leo was born, everything else faded. It was an emergency C-section. Complications. Panic. Then relief. I remember holding him for the first time, tiny and warm, swaddled in a hospital blanket. And for a moment, the world made sense again. When we brought him home, Bonnie barked excitedly from the backyard. She jumped up, tail wagging, eager to see me after so many days. But I didn't go to her. I was exhausted, sore, obsessed with germs, sleep schedules, feeding times. The entire house was sterilized, baby-proofed. We washed our hands a dozen times a day. Bonnie wasn't allowed near. My husband fed her and gave her quick pats on the head, but even he became distant. We were overwhelmed. And Bonnie, she stayed quiet. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear her whining softly through the window while I rocked Leo to sleep. Her cries were almost apologetic, as if she thought she'd done something wrong. But the truth is, I just forgot how to love her. She watched our lives through the fence. Through glass. Through distance. I didn't know it then, but she was waiting for her moment, not to come back in, but to prove she still belonged. By the time Leo turned 1, he was already walking. A little wobbly, a little fearless. He'd toddle around the house, grabbing furniture for balance, laughing at his own footsteps. Our days were full of lullabies, baby gates, toy blocks scattered across the floor. The house echoed with his tiny voice, and outside Bonnie watched. She had a clear view from the corner of the backyard. Her doghouse sat near the fence, shaded by an old oak tree. From there she could see into the kitchen window, into Leo's world. Every morning, she would be sitting there when I opened the curtains. Every evening, still there when the sun dipped below the trees. She never barked, never whined. She just watched. Sometimes Leo would notice her. He'd press his chubby hands against the glass and giggle. "Doggy," he'd say. And Bonnie, God, she'd light up. Ears perked, tail thumping against the ground like a drum. But I never opened the door. I told myself she was too strong, too unpredictable. What if she jumped? What if she knocked him over? So I kept them apart. I thought I was protecting my son. But now I know I was slowly breaking something sacred. A bond that never asked for proof, only trust. It was a Sunday. I remember because we had pancakes for breakfast, and Leo had syrup all over his cheeks. My husband was fixing something in the garage. I was cleaning up in the kitchen, humming to myself. It was just another normal, forgettable morning. Until it wasn't. The side gate, the one that led from the front yard to the backyard, it must have been left open. Maybe the wind. Maybe the mailman didn't close it all the way. I still don't know. But that's how they got in. The neighbors' dogs. 3 of them. Strays, really big, aggressive, always barking at anything that moved. We'd complained before, but nothing had changed. They weren't trained. They weren't safe. And somehow, that morning, they got through the gate. Into our backyard. I didn't know Leo had wandered outside. I thought he was playing in the hallway. I thought he was near his toys. But he wasn't. He'd pushed open the sliding door. I hadn't locked it. Just for a minute. Just while I rinsed a plate. The scream he let out. It was the kind of sound that rips through bone. When I ran outside, barefoot, breath caught in my throat. I saw him. Standing near the old tree. And I saw them. The 3 dogs circling, growling, eyes wild. And then, I saw Bonnie. Bonnie didn't hesitate. She launched forward like a bullet, chain still dragging behind her, paws thundering across the yard. Her body collided with the first dog before I even had time to scream. The sound, the growls, the yelps, her bark. It all blurred into chaos. She stood between Leo and the others, teeth bared, hair raised, a warrior. The other dogs snapped at her, lunged, circled. But she didn't back down. She didn't move an inch away from my son. I ran toward them, screaming, but my legs were jelly. My husband came from the garage, grabbing a metal rod, yelling and swinging. But Bonnie had already taken the brunt of the attack. One of the strays bit into her shoulder. Another latched onto her back leg. But she didn't even cry. She turned, jaws clamping down, forcing one away. Blood splattered across the grass. And through all of it, Leo stood frozen, tears streaming down his cheeks, paralyzed by fear. Bonnie moved, shielding him again. I finally reached them, scooping Leo up in my arms, backing away as my husband drove off the last of the strays. They scattered, tails between their legs. Bonnie collapsed, breathing hard, covered in blood. Some hers, some not. She looked up at me, her eyes barely open, and her tail gave one slow wag. She had done her job. She had protected the child I once thought she might harm. We wrapped Bonnie in a blanket, blood soaking through the fabric before we even reached the car. Leo was in my arms, silent now, clutching my shirt like it was the only thing keeping him anchored. My husband drove, running every red light, one hand clenched on the wheel, the other gripping Bonnie's collar in the back seat. At the emergency vet, they took her from us without waiting for paperwork. I remember the smell of antiseptic, the cold metal bench, the way Leo clung to me like a baby again. Even though just yesterday he'd been running like a little man. We sat in silence. For the first time in a long time, I prayed. Not just out of fear, but out of guilt. She didn't hesitate. She didn't think about how we'd pushed her away. She didn't care that we made her sleep alone, eat alone, live alone. She just saw danger and ran toward it. Hours passed. A nurse finally came out, eyes tired, voice gentle. She's alive. But it was close. I broke down. Leo reached up and touched my cheek, confused by my tears. He whispered one word over and over. Doggy, doggy, doggy. And that's when I knew. Bonnie wasn't just our dog. She was his guardian, his protector, his hero. It took weeks for Bonnie to heal. The vet said we were lucky. Her injuries were severe, but not life-threatening. The worst was the bite on her shoulder, deep and jagged, but the stitches held, and her spirit? It never wavered. I spent every moment I could with her, sitting by her side on the couch, talking to her softly. Her eyes were tired, but there was a spark in them. The same one she'd had when we first brought her home. But Leo was still scared. He didn't understand what had happened. Every time he looked at her, he would flinch, unsure. I could see it in his eyes, that deep, innocent fear. We kept him away at first, letting her rest, letting her adjust. But the day came when she stood up and took her first steps around the house again. Slowly, cautiously. It was like the old Bonnie was back, determined. And then when she finally walked into the living room with her head held high, Leo was sitting there, playing with his blocks. For a moment he didn't notice her. But she approached him quietly, her tail wagging slowly, her eyes watching him carefully. I held my breath. He turned and their eyes met. And then, he reached out his tiny hand. "Doggy," he said, a smile tugging at his lips. Bonnie lowered her head, nuzzling his hand gently, as if saying, "I'm here, little one. I'll always be here." And I knew in that moment, everything had changed. The days after that were slow but beautiful. It felt like we were all relearning how to live together, not as a family with a dog, but as a family because of her. Bonnie was cautious, as if she were still healing, still wondering if the danger was gone for good. But each day, she grew stronger. She started to play with Leo again, at first tentatively, then with full abandon. They were inseparable. I had to laugh when Leo started bringing her toys, showing her his blocks and little stuffed animals. He would say, "Play doggy," in his little voice, and Bonnie would nudge the toy with her nose as if asking, "Is this what we're doing today?" We let her sleep inside again, not on the couch, but in her old spot at the foot of our bed. She seemed content, lying there quietly at night, her body relaxed. It felt right, like things were finally where they belonged. And Leo? He learned the most important lesson of all. Trust doesn't come from fear. It comes from love. And love never asks for anything in return. It only gives. Bonnie had saved him that day. But what she gave us all wasn't just her loyalty. It was her belief in the family we once were, and the family we could still be. And for that, we would always be grateful. A few months later, the weather had warmed up, and the air was thick with the scent of spring. Leo was growing so fast, walking more confidently, laughing louder, getting into everything. And Bonnie? She was by his side, always. But this time there was a new energy in her. A quiet strength. I could see it in the way she moved, like she had finally forgiven us for what we had done, for the way we'd pushed her away. She no longer acted like a dog with something to prove. She had nothing to prove. She was simply our protector. It was another Sunday when the next challenge came. My husband had taken Leo to the park, and I was in the kitchen making lunch. The house was still and peaceful, the kind of quiet that lets you forget that something could change at any moment. I didn't hear the low growl at first, but Bonnie did. Her ears perked up. Her body went rigid. I heard her footsteps, slow but deliberate, as she made her way toward the door. I looked up, confused, but she was already gone. I rushed to the window just in time to see Bonnie standing at the edge of the yard, staring into the woods behind our house. And there it was. A coyote. It was coming closer, too close for comfort. And Bonnie wasn't hesitating. She stood between it and our property line, her teeth bared, her body tense with warning. I knew Bonnie wouldn't back down. She never had. But there was a dangerous edge to her protective instincts now. It wasn't just about protecting Leo anymore. It was about protecting everything we had. I ran out into the yard calling her name, but I didn't need to. She already knew what she was doing. The coyote, sensing the challenge, started to back off. Bonnie slowly moved forward, growling low, not allowing it even an inch closer. Finally, the coyote turned, disappearing into the woods, retreating. Bonnie stood there, still, watching for any sign of danger. Her chest rose and fell as she breathed heavily, but she didn't move. Not until I reached her and knelt beside her. You saved us again, I whispered, rubbing her ear gently. And she leaned into me as if saying, this is what I do. I protect. I had no idea what happened at the house that day until I returned with Leo. My wife was sitting in the yard with Bonnie, both of them calm as if nothing had happened. But I could see it in Bonnie's eyes, the way she looked at me. Like she was saying, I did what I had to do. Leo was babbling about the park, about the swing he had learned to climb on. But when he saw Bonnie, he immediately ran toward her. He knew she was his protector. We had a moment of silence, a bond that spoke louder than words. Bonnie was no longer just the dog in the yard. She was family. More than that, she was the protector of our peace. And as I watched my wife sitting there, I realized just how much we had all changed. We had taken Bonnie in, put her outside, treated her like a tool for our safety, but she had always seen us as family. She had never asked for anything in return. She gave everything without hesitation. The bond we shared now was deeper than we had ever realized. She had saved us. Not just once but twice. And that's when I knew. Bonnie wasn't just a dog anymore. She was the heart of our family. As the months passed, Bonnie's confidence grew. She no longer had that sad, distant look in her eyes. She had become the dog we had always known her to be, loyal, brave, and full of life. Leo was now 3 years old, and their bond was undeniable. He would run to her every morning, pulling on her collar to play, as she trotted beside him, wagging her tail. There was an unspoken trust between them. Bonnie knew that Leo was still a child, still learning the world. And Leo knew that Bonnie would always be there for him. Always. One day, after a long walk in the park, we returned home to find Bonnie sitting by the door, watching us with quiet anticipation. She had waited for us to come back, as always. But this time, when I opened the door, she walked in as though it was her rightful place. No hesitation. No fear. Just the calm assurance that she was home. I knew then that Bonnie had forgiven us for everything. The distance we had put between us. The time we had spent apart. It didn't matter anymore. She was home. And we were home. That night I couldn't sleep. The image of the man behind the fence haunted me. But more than that, it was the sound of Bonnie's growl. It wasn't just warning. It was history. I walked out into the yard barefoot, the grass cool beneath my feet. Bonnie was curled in her old doghouse, but the moment I stepped near, she lifted her head. I knelt beside her and placed a hand on her fur. She leaned into me, her eyes gentle, patient. And I whispered, I'm sorry, not just for the chain. Not just for the months she spent watching us through a window, loyal and left out. I was apologizing for every moment I didn't trust her. For letting fear eclipse love. Bonnie had never changed. We did. And somehow, despite everything, she had waited. For us to remember who she was. That night I didn't go back inside. I laid beside her, head resting against her shoulder, feeling her heartbeat. My protector. My friend. And as dawn broke, painting the sky with soft gold, I realized something. Bonnie hadn't just saved Leo. She had saved all of us. The morning after I slept beside Bonnie, something shifted inside me. I woke up with dew in my hair, the early sun warming the side of my face. Bonnie was still next to me, alert but calm. She hadn't left my side all night. Just like always. I stood up and looked at the rusted chain that still lay coiled near her doghouse. It wasn't clipped to her anymore. We hadn't needed it since the incident, but it was still there. Like a reminder. Like guilt made solid. And I picked it up. It felt heavier than I remembered. I looked at Bonnie, and then at the small figure watching us through the window. Leo, in his pajamas, his little hand pressed to the glass. He waved. Bonnie wagged her tail. I smiled. Then I walked to the trash bin and dropped the chain in, hearing it land with a dull metallic thud. Bonnie was never meant to be caged. She was never meant to be feared. She was family. And family, real family, protects each other. That evening, we let her inside again. At first, she seemed unsure, as if waiting to be told no again. But when Leo ran up and wrapped his arms around her neck, and I didn't stop him, she understood. From then on, Bonnie had a new spot. Not in the cold yard, but by the fireplace where her bones didn't ache in the winter. Where Leo would read his picture books aloud to her, pointing at each word like she understood. And maybe in some way she did. Years passed. Leo grew taller, and Bonnie a little slower. Her face grayed, her eyes softened with age. But that fierce loyalty? That silent, brave devotion? It never faded. Even in her last days, when we knew her time was coming, she tried to follow Leo to school. She still watched over him at night. Still listened for danger. Even when her ears didn't work like they used to. The day we buried her in the backyard, beneath the tree where she used to chase butterflies, Leo cried harder than I'd ever seen. So did we all. And even now, when I see that patch of grass, when the wind stirs the leaves, I swear, I can still hear the jingle of her collar. Still feel the echo of her watchful presence. Bonnie wasn't just our dog. She was our guardian, our healer, our redemption. And I will never forget her.